Miss Meaghan Flowers.
Hey.
How are you?
Hi, Melissa. I'm great. How are you
Good.
doing?
I'm so excited to have you on. I feel like we've been trying to make this happen for a really long time.
Yeah,
And
months, I think.
yeah, I think so. But here we are.
Yeah,
I'm very
yeah.
excited to talk to you. Um, you are currently in your RV in your driveway. Am I right?
Yeah, I sure am because I have six children in the house. So if we want like even kind of quiet, I
Yeah.
also have a sitter just so everyone knows it's not
They're
just
not
like
in the
Lord of the
themselves.
Flies in there. Exactly.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yes.
amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so before there's so many things that we want to talk about. But before we do that, can you introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Meaghan. I am a foster adoptive biological homeschool, all around mama.
Mhm.
And married to my husband Mark for 15 years. And we started foster care when our oldest biological son was one. It was like right before his first birthday, right? Isn't that wild?
That's so
Um,
crazy.
yeah, and on his first birthday, for his like at his birthday party, we had our first placement,
Oh my
and
gosh.
he was a 2 year old. So we had a like brand new 1 year old and a 2 year old.
Gosh.
So we've been fostering for 13 years. We have taken placement but probably like about 75 kids over that time.
Wow.
Um, but currently in our family, my husband and I, our oldest Vanessa is almost 23.
Okay.
Um, then Zeke is 14. Abigail is 12. Angelina is 10 next week, and we'll tell everyone who will listen. Um,
Yay.
yes,
I love
Natalie's
that.
8.5. And then we have two littles who are in foster care, and they are 2.5 and 9 months old.
Woo. I'm tired for you.
Yeah. I'm tired too. We've done like, you know, 14 years of toddlers. And I feel like that's the part that makes me the most tired.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
Toddlers and puppies. You've done puppies, and puppies make me tired.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you like add a puppy and a toddler and you're just like, what was I
Why?
thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, well, I'm excited that you're here, but we're going to talk mostly about adoption because
Okay.
of National Adoption Month, which we love. Um,
Yes.
but before we do that, we need to talk about books because
Yeah.
I like to affectionately refer to you as the book lady. I'm sure I'm not the only
Agreed.
one.
Yes.
So you sell PaperPie books. You are what, a
I do.
consultant? A consultant.
A brand partner or a story maker.
Thank you for correcting me. That sounds
Yeah.
StoryMaker. I like that. Okay.
I know. It's kind of my favorite because
Yes,
we have like dads and men who are book ladies too. And so we needed
that's
a
true.
title that was more inclusive of everyone.
I love that. Okay. So, StoryMaker. Um, I love paper pie books. Can I just put that out there? First of all.
Me too.
But mostly because of you. Like I feel like I after you introduced me to paper pie books, which used to be Esborn books for those who or UBAM, as some people
Yeah.
may know. It was kind of like I think I came to a party or something, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I know these books. I used to use these when I homeschooled Haley back in the day, but I didn't make that connection that that's what they were. I thought it was just like some homeschool book company. Turns out it's not.
Yes.
And so since then, I have found so many great books, and I actually purchase a lot of books from PaperPie for my clients that I work with.
Mhm.
So I would love for you to tell me more about PaperPie, but maybe specifically the social emotional books and how great they are. Let's put in a little plug really quick, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely. So I first discovered these books right around COVID because we are like library fanatics.
Hmm.
Like we will go check bags full of library books and we take them everywhere we go. We read library books all the time. And I was like, why do I need to buy books when we read library books?
Hmm.
And then the library's closed.
Yeah.
And we like had a little panic. And so first we started with like sticker books, activity books, and my kids just loved them.
Hmm.
And then I started to realize these were the books that they kept coming back to over and over.
Hmm.
And I decided I might need all the books. And
Yeah.
so that's how I started becoming a book lady or
Yeah.
story maker.
Yeah.
And specifically, we have a whole section of books that are meant to help kids with social emotional needs.
Mm-hmm.
We have a really fantastic one called Leo and the Octopus
Mm-hmm.
that is from the perspective of an autistic child and how he views the world and how his interactions at an aquarium tell a lot more about him and his interactions with a friend that he meets and a couple friends that he meets. So I love that one. There is a couple that are reusable stickers.
Yeah.
So
those are my favorite.
Yeah, like All Better.
All Better is my favorite. Yep.
Yes. And we use that so many times to help our kids practice giving and receiving care.
Yep.
So animal gets an owie, you get to put the Band-Aid on, you clean it, kiss it, put a Band-Aid on it, All Better. We also have some really great mindful books, mindfulness books that talk about bullying and positive attitude, challenges with sleep and resiliency. And those I love because they're kind of like a composition notebook, but they're filled with different activities and resources to really tangibly help kids probably as young as like kindergarten with some support all the way up through. I even have like middle school and high schoolers use them.
Totally.
They're just such a great resource and a really tangible way to help a kid who may not have a safe adult to work through these things to be able to navigate them with the assistance of the book.
Yeah. I love it. You know, another one I really like is, I think it's called Mindful Activities. And it has the little QR code that you can scan and it plays music while you do the activity on each page, or maybe like every few pages.
Yeah, I think there's like a playlist that you can go through.
Yeah.
And there's different like coloring or drawing.
I love that one.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And I feel like those are ones that can be used by parents too.
Totally.
You just sit down and have your quiet time next to your kiddo.
Yep.
Or we do a lot of the magic painting. There's like an unworry and an unhurry magic painting.
Yeah.
And you just sit down. We often will like plug in an audiobook or do some music and just have some quiet time where you have to slow down or your colors get mixed up and you have to slow down and just take some time and some deep breaths. Doing an activity.
Amazing. I'm going to link your PaperPie website in the show notes. So if people are hearing this and are like, what is this magic? They can come find it. But also I will include a way to contact you in the show notes too. So people can come, because I'm not kidding. Every family I work with, I would say 90% of them get some PaperPie book from me because they're just, they're so good. And I am so happy that they have created these books. So I don't have to do the searching of like, okay, let's look through. Are these good? Are these not? I know that they're all good. So that's what I love about it. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, and I love giving recommendations. So if anybody's like, hey, these are my kids, these are the things we're working on, I can be like, oh, you need this one, and this one, and help actually really personalize those.
Perfect. So that's what you do as like, would you say that that's like what you do for fun on the side as your business? What would you call that?
Yeah, I would say it's like a fun business.
Okay.
Because I can like pick it up and put it down depending on like the level of chaos and appointments in our lives.
Yeah.
And it's such a cool way to give back. So I've gotten to do some book drives for like a visitation agency. We've done it for some group homes. We've done for Vanessa Meaghan, our local crisis nursery.
That's cool.
And just being able to donate. And then every school that I get to do a book fair at, we donate half, like it matches half the proceeds. And so with our kids at school, we were able to donate hundreds of books back to the school or hundreds of dollars of books. And it's just such a cool way to tangibly share something we love and something that I know families are going to use.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I love that. Okay. Well, I couldn't not have you on or I couldn't have you on and not talk about PaperPie books because they're amazing and you're amazing the way that you just like know so much about them and can lead people in the right direction. So yeah.
Thank you. It's so fun. I love a challenge, especially a kid who doesn't like to read. Like I will get you hooked.
That's right. You're like, I'll find something. That's awesome. Okay. So the reason that we're here is to talk about adoption. So you already mentioned how long you've been in foster care and that you do have some adopted kiddos in your family. But however much or little you want to talk about your story, I would love to hear from your perspective, like what got you into foster care and adoption, and how has that journey been for you?
Yeah. So when I was a teenager, there were some girls that I went to youth group with, and their parents, their family was a foster family, and they took care of babies. And I was like, when I grow up, I could do that. Like, I love
Mm,
babies. I can help take care of babies. It was just something that was on my heart from at least the time I was a teenager, if not younger.
mm-hmm,
And same with Mark, like we knew that at some point, someday we would want to do foster care or adoption. And we kind of figured that we would wait until, our kids were grown or we were more established as a couple or a family.
mm-hmm,
And then our sweet friends were like, we have to go to CPR training. Can you like help babysit our kids?
mm-hmm.
And so they had, I think, 6 kiddos who were in foster care at their home in their home. And we came over and just hung out with the kids all day. And it was incredible to see and recognize like this scary concept of foster care and adoption was just a bunch of awesome, normal, I mean,
Yeah.
normal's not the right,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
awesome, excellent kids that needed somebody to step in the gap with them.
Yeah.
And so we left that day going, I think we can do this. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think we need to wait.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to our foster care orientation at the state. And then we looked at each other and we're like, I don't know, this feels like a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
So over the
Because that's
course of about,
overwhelming, that orientation.
it's so
Yeah.
overwhelming.
So overwhelming. Yeah.
Yes. And I used to get to sit in those orientations as a mentor and tell people, like, I know you're feeling freaked out right now because I
Mm-hmm.
felt that way too.
Yeah.
And just like let it sink in, give yourself some time. And we took us probably about 9 months to decide to move forward and go through with the licensing process.
Mm-hmm. And that I think is reasonable. I think that
Yes.
if people who are listening that have like thought about it, or maybe even been to the orientation and are like, no, I can't, like take time. 9 months to
Yeah.
think about it is really reasonable because it's a big decision. It's not like,
Mhm.
it's not like buying a car. Like we're talking about
Yes.
changing the life of children. So take time. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And really changing the dynamics of your family.
Yeah.
And so there's just a lot to consider. And so we started the process thinking like we will just foster.
Okay.
We had a son that was about to be 1. And we kind of said, like, if the right situation comes up, if God leads these kids to our family, then we are open to adoption, but
Mm-hmm.
we are not like doing foster care with the intention to adopt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we just kind of started. We jumped in. Our first placement was super tricky. And I remember our social worker sitting us down and being like, you guys have been baptized by fire. Like,
Oh,
this is a tough
yeah.
kid. And knowing what I know now, like, I'm curious if he would be as tough with the
Yeah.
experience we have now. But it was tough. And he was with us for 60 days. And I remember just like sobbing after he
Mm-hmm.
left and being like, you were so hard,
Mm-hmm.
but also I loved you so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just that kind of started our journey. And from that place,
Like it
we
wasn't
had a,
so hard that you didn't do it again.
oh no, no, it
So
was so hard, but we knew that it was so right. Like
yeah.
it was so right where we needed to be.
Yeah.
And knowing that we had taken placement of a really tough kid, I feel like in some ways buoyed our confidence a little bit to say,
Yeah.
like, maybe not all placements are going to be this tricky, but
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes they are.
Yeah. So how long before you took your next placement?
Um, Within a couple weeks.
Okay.
And yeah,
So
I can't
it
remember
wasn't right
exactly, but
away.
I don't think so. I think we took somewhere between a couple days and a couple weeks,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, just to kind of like do some grieving, do some
Mm-hmm.
processing, and be ready for that next yes.
Yeah.
And with foster care, oftentimes you get calls and you say yes, and the kids never end up coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of like preparing for a child that may or may not actually end up in your home.
Yeah.
And so I feel like maybe there was a false alarm or two where we got like
Sure.
everything ready and
Then it didn't
then
happen.
changed our plan.
Yep. Yep. And that happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, tell me then, so you didn't get into it to adopt, but eventually
Yeah.
you did adopt. So tell me what was that like, that transition? Was it like one day you wanted to, or one day you didn't, and the next day you did? Tell me about that.
Yeah, it was not like that at all.
Right.
Like I feel like in some ways I was a little terrified the whole time.
Yeah.
But we had taken placement. So we had gone from just taking like one preschooler at a time
Mhm.
to we got this call about a sibling group of 3.
Okay.
And it was one of those phone calls. Actually, it was a sibling group of 2. And it was one of those phone calls where you just like, I just knew the Lord was saying, like, you need to pursue this.
Mhm.
And I was like, this sounds really hard. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm the right person for the job. I don't know if I can do this. And we picked up this brother and sister. And at the same time, I met their big sister.
Okay.
And I didn't even know she existed. And
Okay.
so through a course of events, we took placement of all 3. And
Okay.
they were with us for a couple months. And then were not with us anymore,
Okay.
kind of due to the case plan. And that was like January. And the oldest sibling in the group we stayed in contact with. I would visit her at school. I would, see her, pick her up from her birth mom's house.
Mhm.
We just kept this relationship, and she was 11 at the time.
Okay.
And I just remember being like, I can do this. Like, I
Mhm.
can, invest in you. I can love you. During the time we were still taking usually emergency placements, that like
Sure.
middle of the night after hours call. And then it was a Friday in October. I got a phone call, and it was a voicemail that said, like, I need to talk to you about this specific child. I have some questions for you. And I went into that weekend, like, I called right back, and of course, no answer.
No one. Yeah. So
So
you
I
didn't
went
worry
into that
all
weekend,
weekend.
all weekend,
Ah,
like, oh my gosh. And Mark's like, it's fine. They probably have a question about immunizations. And I was like,
your
no,
gut was saying
like,
no. There's something else.
absolutely
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
And I just knew that they were going to ask us to take placement again.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that the place in the case that this situation was, it was going to be like, are you an adoptive placement for this child?
Mm-hmm.
And I think our biological kids, we had 2 at the time. So I think they were like 3 and 1. I think they were 3 and 1. And had just turned 12.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so we knew her and we loved her, but the possibility of like, number one, saying forever, yes, forever to a kiddo, and the possibility of raising an older child, like, was pretty intimidating, especially being like a fairly young mom,
Yeah.
thinking like, how are we going to do this? And then of course on Monday I talked to the social worker, and she was asking us to be, they can't say adoptive placement at that
Sure.
point, but foster long-term potential adoptive placement. And so I just remember wrestling for the next week or 2, and we just had lots of conversations and spent lots of time like talking to trusted friends and family and praying about the situation, and just like, could we meet her needs long term? Could we be sensitive to her cultural needs?
Yeah.
How could we do this, and what would it look like moving forward? And then even thinking about the dynamics between our little kids and having an oldest. And ultimately we said yes. And then the state was like, never mind, we're going to try this intensive service for the next 30 days. And so it was this push and pull of like, okay, I know what this is going to be. Okay, I know what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, we decided yes. Okay, not now.
Yeah.
And then finally she came to our home, and we spent, I think it was about 14 months before we finally got to adoption at that point.
Okay. And that was your
Yeah,
first
and
adoption?
yes, that's our Vanessa.
Okay.
She's amazing.
So obviously you went out of birth order.
Yes, we did.
So can we talk about that? Because there is a lot of people and a lot of professionals who give that advice that you really need to stick with birth order. And I personally don't agree with that you can't give a blanket statement like that. There's some situations that is true. But how did you ultimately decide that you were okay going out of birth order? Was it advice? Was it gut intuition? What was it that allowed you? Because I think it is a common, like,
Yeah.
don't go out of birth order. So what allowed you to do different?
Yeah, I think one thing that makes a really big difference in our situation is we have a big gap.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a pretty significant gap between our oldest biological child and our adopted daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And so because there's like an 8-ish year gap there,
Mm-hmm.
it was able to preserve her role as kind of being the oldest in her biological family. And our son had such a big gap that he was kind of able to preserve his role as the oldest of the little kids, is what we called him for a really long time.
Yeah.
And I think that gap really helped.
Okay.
We had a lot of conversations, with counselors, trusted friends and family to try to make sure we were making the right decision.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like, he was a kid who wasn't necessarily phased with kids his age, where another one of my kids, like, if you take a child within about 9 months of her, she is kind of a train wreck. It really disrupts her. And it's been interesting as our family has grown to see and get to know the different personalities of my kids. Because it really depends kid to kid. Like, okay, it needs to be at least 18 months older than this child, or this child is okay to have, a kiddo that's like 6 months older or younger.
Yeah.
And really just getting to know your kids made a huge difference for us.
I also heard you say preserving Vanessa's being the oldest of her biological family. How does that play into decisions when you're looking at not only your own kids' personality, I shouldn't say that, the kids in your home, their personalities and how they do with different ages, but then you also have to weigh into that the child that is coming into your home.
Yes. And I think something that was unique in some situations is just because a child is maybe technically the middle child in their biological family, between, like, maybe they have a different parent, and so maybe they have a different dad, so they don't always live together all the time, or maybe there's a big gap. And I think it's more, for me, it was more about the role of she is like the oldest child in her biological family. And wanting to, she was kind of like almost like an oldest only, because there was a big gap ahead of her and a big gap behind her. And so she really has a lot of those characteristics of an oldest, and she's such a great leader. And it was really cool to be able to integrate that into our family through foster care and adoption.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I love what you're saying, because I think there's so many different factors that come into deciding on whether to go outside of the birth order. And it's not, I think I already said this, but it's this, you can't put a blanket statement on it. You can't say, yes, it's okay, or no, it's not okay, because we're talking about humans. We're talking about people, right? Like, so many different
and there's
layers.
so many factors.
Yeah.
And I think temperament plays a huge role, but I also think parenting style too. Because depending on, are you able to meet individual needs within, the larger group of children that you have? Like, how are you able to cater, doesn't necessarily feel the right word, but, how are you able to cater your parenting skills to meet what each kid needs? And I feel like that's really important, whether or not you're looking at birth order.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Okay. So you adopt Vanessa, still taking foster care placements.
Yeah, we took a break for a bit because our family just needed some time to settle. And then we had like back to back like emergency. Hey, this kid's gonna, it's gonna be a long-term placement, and they leave like a week later. Okay, this kid's gonna be a long-term placement. They leave, 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
And so we had really just kind of settled into this like fast transition of kiddos in and out of our home, and had said, like, we would be okay doing a long-term placement. Like, we are ready for our family to settle. There's so many like doctor's appointments and services you have to set up right away. And so we took placement of a 5-month-old baby girl.
Okay.
They said she had 0 medical needs, and she, right, knowing her, she had 0 medical needs, and she was only needing a placement for 3 weeks.
Okay.
So we were like, well, why not,
Yeah.
and picked her up and just immediately recognized she did not have 0 medical needs.
Yeah.
Um, and so we just dug in and tried to uncover what exactly was going on with her and how we could help. She ended up having like horrid reflux and a milk protein allergy and challenges with her swallow and
Mm-hmm.
things that literally took us like years to unravel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with any kiddo that comes into your home, you have to think about like what did they experience prenatally and
Yeah.
what did they experience, when they were in their birth family's home, and what were they exposed to, both toxins and exposures to different experiences.
Yeah.
Um, and so we really just tried to unpack our sweet girl and support her the best that we could, knowing that her case was about 3 years long. And I think there were 3 times that she was going to be reunified during that case. And it fell apart at the last minute every single time.
Man.
And just like, I can almost even like just feel that those years of that
Yeah.
tension of like, are you going to be ours forever? Or are you just ours for right now?
Yeah.
And just praying through that, those days and months and years where you're trying to hold everything really loosely,
Yeah.
but also you just love these kids so fiercely
Mm-hmm.
and want to protect them and equip them. And yeah, especially I think there's a different layer when you are parenting a medical kiddo, because you really end up stepping in and being an advocate for them
Yeah.
and spending, hours in therapies and doctor's visits. And, you're the one there for blood draws, and you're the one there
Yeah.
for procedures and stuff like that. And so I feel like we just we rode the storm out with her. And we ended up having a biological child in kind of the middle of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so our girls are 16 months apart. Like, well, that's a surprise.
Yep.
Here we go.
Yep.
And so we finalized Angelina's adoption after she was 3, a
Okay.
couple months after her 3rd birthday,
Mm-hmm.
and have really just continued to like, we took about a year off, did a big house remodel.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, our family needed time to regroup.
Yeah.
Like, we needed time to just settle in and find new rhythms as a family, connect with each other, because there's so much uncertainty when you have a child in foster care, because at any point, like, you can get
Yeah.
an email, you can get a phone call, and the trajectory of your day and your months change.
Yeah.
And so I felt like there was a lot of really like anxiety and unsettledness that
Mm-hmm.
had to settle,
Yeah.
because we could relax now, not having to worry like, okay, she scraped her knee. Like, do I have to tell the social worker?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I
Yeah.
need to get that paper signed. But I'm the mom now, like
Yeah.
I can sign that paper.
Yeah. Well, so once you adopted her though, doesn't it just become roses and unicorns? Right? Like,
I
why
would
did you have to
love
take a
to
year
say yes,
off? I'm so confused.
right? I
Yeah,
would love to say yes,
it doesn't just
but
flip a switch
no.
when you adopt.
No, and I felt like that was very much like the story for me. Like, I needed to decompress and I
Mhm.
needed to process that trauma, because there's so much secondary trauma you can pick up throughout
Mhm.
this process. And I needed to spend time processing that I actually do have a voice in the role of her mom, because there is so much when your child's in foster care that you can't do and you have to ask
Yeah.
permission for.
Yeah.
And it took a while for me to settle into that role,
Yeah.
and to kind of let my guard come down to just fully, deeply love her, like I knew she wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Um, and still, we always say, like, there's no guarantees with our adopted kiddos, there's no guarantees with our biological kiddos.
Yep.
And so kind of whatever comes will come, and, have faith that we will get through it. But things definitely got a lot harder before they got better.
Yeah.
And I wish somebody would have told me that kind of that age of 5 can be really tricky for a lot of our kids.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. And I felt like we had been taking care of babies and toddlers for so long, and we had jumped ahead and we're doing, big kids and teenagers.
Yeah.
But this is our first experience with that age of 5. And since then, like there's so many families I've walked alongside to say, like, a lot of this is the age of 5, their behaviors kind of spike. Sometimes our kids need to start meds to get their nervous systems and their bodies to settle so they can even process some of that trauma. There's so much learning and growing that happens. They're learning to read and they're starting kindergarten. Like, there's such a burst there cognitively that it can be really overwhelming behaviorally.
Yeah, absolutely. And so kind of going on a tangent really quick, because I think there's probably other things that you would say, I wish somebody would have told me. What are some other things? Because what I want for people to hear is these thoughts that they're thinking and feeling and experiencing they're not the only ones, right?
Yeah. I think that we were told throughout her case, like, a lot of these behaviors will settle when she's not having visits anymore.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
Yeah.
Like, if anything, they spiked. And so I wish somebody would have talked to me about that.
Yeah.
Because for so long we have been, like, parenting it from the perspective of trauma and attachment. And, I think that we may have missed some things along the way because we were really focused on that lens. So to just remember to take a step back and look holistically at the whole child.
Yeah.
Not just for parents, but providers too. And then when we were brand new foster parents, our second placement was a brother and a sister, and they told us this is their second dependency. This will likely be an adoption case. And 12 months later, it was not. Like, they left our home. And so I wish I would have known just how much to really hold that loosely.
Yeah.
We don't know their case plan. We don't even their case plan and what actually happens can be very different.
Yeah.
And so
from one day to the next,
literally one day to the next.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so just to hold things really loosely, but to just keep, like, showing up for these kiddos that, we're entrusted to right now.
Yeah.
And I like to say I'm their right now mom.
Yeah.
Because, even with our biological and adoptive kids, like, all I have is right now. And so how can I be present in this moment? Obviously with our kids that are in our home, long-term, forever adoption, biologically, I think that you can plan a little bit better. But during all of the things we went through after our second adoption, I wish someone had introduced the concept of, what's it called? Future. I'll think of it. I just had it. It's like when you're predicting the future, but you're afraid of it. You're like future forecasting, something like that.
Yeah.
Because in my brain, I couldn't see, like, I could see these behaviors at age 3.
Yeah.
And all I could see was, what are these going to look like at 13?
Yep.
What are these going to look like at 23?
All the time. That happens all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And so to be able to backtrack that and say, like, let's unpack, like, 3 weeks at a time, or 3 months, or 6 months. Let's think about, like, what school's going to look like in the fall, but maybe not what school's going to look like next fall.
Yeah.
And future casting, I think it's future casting.
Okay.
And just learning that you can just take those bite-sized approaches. But at the same time, it was really powerful for me to unpack those huge fears and to work with my counselor about some of those really scary things of, like, what if I have a child who I can't maintain in home placement for?
Yeah.
And what if these behaviors get too big and I have to make decisions for safety? And I feel like even just saying those out loud to my counselor, to other trusted people, took away that fear and that power of, like, those deep, dark, scary things that you think about that you don't want to talk about with anybody. And it
Because you
took
think
that
you're the only
power away
one.
from it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
you're not.
No, you're
Yeah.
sure not.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. So back, let's come back. I tangented us. Is that even a word? I don't even know. But we're coming back to track here. So you adopt Angelina,
Yes,
still doing foster care.
we
Not done
are.
yet.
Oh, some days I'm so ready to be done. And I just
Yeah.
feel like the Lord is like, you're not done yet.
Yeah.
But I trust that if he can say we're not done yet, that he can sure tell us when we are.
Yeah.
And that is kind of where we're at right now. Our little guy, we brought home from the hospital when he was 2 weeks old, and he is now 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
And baby sister is 9 months old.
Okay.
And so we are just continuing to kind of track. We've taken, some after hours emergency placements. Just kind of throughout that time, we had a little guy that was with us for 25 months. And
Mm,
again, we just thought like we were
this
being
is it.
told this
Yeah.
is an adoption case, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so we celebrate that he is with his biological family. We celebrate that
Yeah.
he gets to grow up with his siblings,
Yeah.
but we also like acknowledge the huge loss
Yeah.
and grief that our family like still walks through. And he has not been with our family for, over a year now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's okay too. I think that's the thing that people maybe misunderstand is like you can celebrate a child being with their birth family and also feel really sad that they're not with you and grieve that loss for your family. But that doesn't mean that you're sad that they're with their birth family. They're like, it's like the movie Inside Out where you can have both,
Yes.
right? It can be in one, and that's
Yeah, both
okay.
and.
It's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Um, so one thing that I wanted to talk about with adoption, and maybe not even just adoption, like in general, raising kids that you didn't birth,
Mhm.
keeping them connected with their biological family. How do you do that?
I actually really love this topic because I feel like this is an area I've really grown in,
Mm-hmm.
and an area I really celebrate. And
Mm-hmm.
so, in the last probably like 3 to 5 years, I feel like I've really um, just been able to grow and like show up with love for our
Mm-hmm.
kids as birth family, even when I don't necessarily feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially when you're in the middle of foster care, there's so much push and pull. And
Yeah.
I work so hard to be a team, but we're not the only players in the case. And
Yeah.
so there's attorneys and judges and providers. And it's easy to feel like your team starts to get divided.
Yeah.
And so I just work really hard to like show up and always try to like refer to the child as like, oh, your son, your daughter, your
Yeah.
child.
That's good.
Um,
Yeah.
just really honor them that way, and try to defer to them, like even at doctor's appointments and things like that. Like, oh, do you want to answer first, or would you like to
Mm-hmm.
fill out this paperwork? Um, Most of the parents that I've worked with, we've been able to have pretty open contact.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you can use a Google Voice number to text, we email, we send pictures back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
I always try to do some kind of photo gift or handprint gift for
Mm-hmm.
like Christmas and Mother's Day and Father's Day. But even, like when your 3 year old's just scribbling and put some Thomas the Train stickers on,
Yeah.
like you can just
Even
say to
that.
mom, love
Yeah.
kiddo, and you can send it in the diaper bag.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it feels
What, like, yeah, tell me, what does that feel like for you as, um, you have this child in your home and meeting the child's day-to-day needs, and you are still thinking of the other parent that doesn't have the child in their home? What motivates you to do that?
I think part of it is just how much I'm delighting in the child, and I want them to share in the delight with me. And
Yeah.
so, like our kiddo had like this sticky uppy mohawk after bath the other night, and being
Mm-hmm.
able to just send a picture and be like, oh my gosh, isn't she the cutest thing you've
Mm-hmm.
ever seen? And then be like, oh, she is the cutest thing. Like it
Yeah.
just multiplies my delight, and I feel like it builds my connection with them.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like best case scenario is when foster parents and biological parents work together as a team. Like it's the best case scenario for the kiddo, whether they are reunified or go to a relative, or adoption down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hope that, I can tell our adopted kiddos someday, like, I tried everything I could to build a relationship with your birth parents. And, here's emails that we sent back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And here's pictures that we shared. And did you know they loved coming to your doctor's appointments
Mm.
and picking out your outfits? Like, I think it's just different pieces of their story that I can tell my kids.
Yeah.
Um, because some of mine don't have open adoptions long
Yeah.
term.
Yeah.
Even if they started that way,
Yeah.
they may not have stayed that way. And to be able to say, like, I technically don't have an agreement or an order from the court, but I am still choosing to send your pictures, even if I haven't gotten a response.
Yeah.
Um, because I know that they love you, or they love you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
And, someday our kids are going to grow up to be adults. And some of them already have, and
Yeah.
they will have questions.
Yeah.
And so I want to be able to say, like, I did everything I could to support, you and your family, and to keep your culture relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've visited church biological families, we've met for ice cream,
Mm.
we've been to the farmer's market and the playground. And if it's safe and appropriate,
Yeah.
to me, it's like, why not?
Yeah. I think that's it right there. If it's safe and appropriate, because obviously there's sometimes where the birth family is not doing as well. And then
Yeah.
it could be a month later, they're doing better. And so we can't just say, oh, well, they lost their parental rights. Their rights were terminated. There's no open adoption agreement because they are, not sober and whatever, ABC. That doesn't mean that's how they're going to be forever. Like, right? So
Yes.
our kids want to know who they are, where they came from. I love that you said putting their story together, because that's what it is. It's their story. And whether we like it or not, their birth parents, their birth family is a part of their story. And we can't discount that.
Right. And one of the things that we've done is to make a photo book that has a family tree of their biological family and a family tree of our adoptive family.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can see, like, these are all the people that make me me,
Yeah.
because it's so important to recognize and value that, even when maybe their family is not healthy and safe, like,
Yeah.
we can still honor them through pictures, through
Yeah.
conversations. We can write letters that we hold on to and hope that we can send them in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's so important
Mm-hmm.
to make sure the words I'm saying and the actions that I am choosing honor my kids' birth family in every way that I can.
Yeah, because ultimately it's honoring them too, right?
Exactly.
If we're saying negative things about their birth family, or like, I can't believe that they did this, or they, whatever, ultimately that's them. That's our kids, because it's a part of them. So yeah, we do have to be really careful. And I think I love how you are able to build relationship, whether your child is in foster care or is adopted, that importance that you see. I love that. That's why I wanted to talk about it, because
Thank you.
you get it and you do a really good job. So
Yeah.
also I want to point out that you at the beginning talked about being a story maker with PaperPie, and just now you're talking about being a story maker.
Yes. Right?
Full
I just feel
circle.
like it all comes together.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh. Okay. So we are running out of time. I don't even know. Meaghan, I might have to have you
Right?
back on
We
another.
could talk for hours.
I
We have so many
know.
good things.
So we're going to just have to wrap this up. I have two final
Right?
questions for you. The first one is, what do you wish more people thought about when it comes to adoption?
Yeah, that is such a great question. I think one thing that we have picked up along the way is to really like assess the capacity of your family.
Mm-hmm.
Because that changes with every child that you add to your family,
Mm-hmm.
and the capacity can shift based on your kids' needs. But also, like as our kids grow, I feel like their mental health needs might grow as well.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
sometimes things settle, but a lot of times, they hit five, they hit puberty, they hit
Yeah.
those older ages, and they don't need as much physical support. You're not changing
Yeah.
diapers and chasing toddlers, but I still spend so much of my day co-regulating. I
Yeah.
say co-regulating other humans.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
just
yeah.
spend so much time doing that,
Yeah.
and making sure that I do the best I can to steward the needs of my kids with the capacity we have as a family, and
Yeah.
recognize when do we need to take a break, when do we need to be done for now. Does there come a point we need to close our license and not
Mm-hmm.
pursue foster care or
Mm-hmm.
adoption?
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Okay. So then the last question, what would be three resources you would recommend to maybe someone looking into adoption, or maybe someone who has adopted and some of what you're saying right now is like new to them? What would be
Yeah.
three resources you would recommend?
Okay, so I know this resource gets recommended every time, but I think it's that important.
Okay.
If you have not read The Connected Parent, like
Yeah.
please go pick it up. The
Yeah.
Connected Child is really great too, but The Connected Parent is so tangible
Yeah.
that I can sit it on my kitchen counter, I can pick it up and read a few pages and be refreshed. Like
Yeah.
it's like I'm back in my TBRI training.
Yeah.
Um, and just remember, like, okay, I can use this script with my kid today.
Yep.
So that is probably my first one.
Okay.
My second one, specifically for adoptive families, is I feel like you can just feel so alone and like you don't know what resources you can access after adoption. And so many families, at least in Washington, can access family preservation services.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you've
Yes.
gotten to talk about that very much,
I
but plug
haven't.
for Melissa. She
Oh,
does
thank
such
you.
an amazing job. You just come in with such grace and joy.
Mm,
And I know I've seen you work with families and seen just the tremendous effect that you have, taking families from that place of frustration and hopelessness into being able to do life a little bit better.
mm.
Um, and so that
Thanks,
resource is
Meaghan.
available to, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you're
Through
welcome.
adoption
It's
support.
available to through adoption support.
Mm-hmm.
And there's multiple agencies that do it.
Yep.
And I even suggest families like right after adoption, even if you feel like things are fine, jump into FPS.
Yeah.
Just say, I need a referral. I need some help. And, we've done it a couple times. And our
Yeah.
sweet counselor was like, why am I here? And I was
Yeah.
like, I just need you to tell me the tools I have in my toolbox
Yeah.
because I have a lot there.
And
But
just
could you
walk
just
walk me through
remind
it
me?
again. Yeah.
Exactly.
Totally. Well, and I think that's where I tell a lot of the families I work with that yes, it's called family preservation services. I don't really like that it's called that because it feels like we're in crisis. We're about to fall apart. We're not well, when the reality is you just need a little coaching. So I like to
Yeah.
call myself a parent coach. I like to say,
Yeah.
I'm here to be your coach and just like give you some gentle reminders and maybe fill your cup a little. And so, yeah, I think that family preservation services term can feel daunting,
Mhm.
but I love that you're right. It's so good, and it's not a bad thing.
Right. It's like after you have a baby, even if things are going well, like go see lactation just in
Yeah.
case, like go get that support. It's the same. Like
Yeah.
after adoption, there's so many things to unpack. Just get that little like hug around your shoulder to help you know
Yeah.
you're doing a great job. And maybe this is an area you can improve a little bit.
Totally. Love that. Okay. All
Yes.
right. So number 3.
Last thing, I just have been deep diving into podcasts.
Okay.
I feel like I go in spurts. But we recently are walking through an autism and an apraxia diagnosis.
Okay.
And so there is just so many resources that you can dive into
Mhm.
in like short intervals of time. Like right
Mhm.
now, it feels really daunting to pick up a book and like
Yeah.
read a book about autism.
Yeah.
But I can pick up a podcast and spend, 40 minutes or even 15 minutes just learning a little bit more
Yeah.
and being able to use what I've learned.
So what are some of your
So I've
faves?
Yeah, so I'm loving the adoption connection
Oh
always.
yeah, always.
So good.
Yeah.
Um, and there is a new one that I found. Her name is Carrie, and it's called SLP Talk Show.
Okay.
And she's a speech language pathologist with a son who has apraxia and is autistic. And
Okay.
so that has been just so eye opening for me. And I feel like you can use it anywhere you go.
Yeah.
But those are two that I've really been spending a lot of time
Okay.
with.
Cool. I will make sure to link both of those. You know what I do with podcasts is I put it on 1.5 speed. So if it,
Yeah.
so if it's like a 20-minute or 30-minute, I can like drive from here to Spokane and I'm done. On to the next one.
Right? I feel like I have it in one ear and I'm kind of multitasking.
Oh,
so I usually stick with
absolutely.
my one speed.
Oh,
But
whoops. I do
I
both.
need to get to 1.5.
Just work your way up. You can do like 1.25 and then 1.3 and then 1.5.
Right? And then you're there.
And you're there. I did try to listen at double speed to one. I can't even remember what it was. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're talking way too fast. So I just
Right.
slowed it down.
Also, are these like humans or chipmunks?
I know.
Because it gets a little high pitched.
It does. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Those are great resources. I love that. So I will link all the things we talked about in the show notes so people can find you and the books and the resources that you mentioned. And yeah, I'm excited to that you were here to share all your amazing knowledge.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad that we finally made this happen. So
yes, me too.
Okay. All right, my friend. If you want to just hang out in your RV a little bit longer, I won't tell anybody that we're done.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Meaghan.
Yeah. Thanks, Melissa.
Bye.